I'm Danny Hicks. Welcome to the Not So Secret Agent podcast, where we learn from top real estate agents how they maintain a thriving business, all while living the good life. I was going to start off by just telling telling the audience a little bit about how we met through the teams, the Brian Buffini event, and then we kind of went on to do our little synergy group that we meet, about once a month. And for those of you guys that have kind of been following me a little bit, Greg is the guy when I've got problems. I call Greg. Greg's my guy. Like when I need help with something, he is the one I dial, and he is way too kind to give me all the information he does. Thank you so much for that.
Everybody needs a guy, Danny.
You're my guy. You know what I mean? I got a guy for that. That's
Everybody
definitely
needs
one of my
one.
sayings. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your business. Let's start there.
Sure. Well, I came into the real estate game in 2005 as a corporate refugee. So I started off with about 13 years experience in the wine business, where I basically worked in the distributor sales force as well as the supplier sales force. And my job was basically to build and develop sales teams. That's kind of what I did. So as I entered into real estate, the team model really spoke to me. I actually started my career out, Danny, on a team as a team agent. And then about a year and a half later, I co-owned that team. And then about a year and a half after that, started my own team, left that company, went and started something fresh at the real estate group called Real Estate Home Team. And that was established in January of 2009. And we've grown a little since then. We started off with 4 agents and doing about 70 transactions a year. And this past year, I think we're at 12 agents, 3 staff members, and over 400 transactions in a year.
So with a business that big, you still have a why. Why are you doing what you're doing? I know because I know.
Yeah, well, I mean, the why changes every season, right?
Right.
Yeah. The why changes. Initially it was survival because I got let go in a corporate acquisition in December of 2004, and interviewed 30 times or 25 times in the first 30 days in January of 2005, and all my corporate opportunities dried up. And I took real estate for something to do during the day to keep myself busy. And I got licensed in real estate in the 3rd week in March, the same week that everything dried up corporately. So my why was survival, right? I had a stay-at-home wife raising 2 daughters that were in private school. We had bought a house about a year and a half before, so I had a brand new mortgage. And so as I say, I didn't get into real estate to try real estate. I got into real estate to do it.
Yeah, there's nothing like the back against your wall and the payments coming in to make you a little motivated, right? It's really easy.
Yeah, whether you're burning the ships or whatever
right,
analogy you want to make, that's exactly right.
The old Cortez saying, burning
That's
the
right.
ships. Yeah, that's absolutely a great why. But that's changed now because that's not your why anymore. You're very, very far from.
Sure, it changes every season, really.
So what is it this season?
Yeah, it changes every season. Right now it's developing agents. So the production is there and the team is there, and it gives me an opportunity to serve and gives me opportunity to grow personally, but also help others grow personally. So that why has become much more outer focused than initially it was survival, and then it was stability, and then it grew into some success, and then from that success, it turns into significance. And so I feel like my business is fairly successful, and so we're kind of in that significance role now. That's where the why is. That's what the driving force is moving forward. Is the bigger picture. What kingdom things are available to me? What opportunities are there for me to serve my team and to serve our staff and to serve our clients and provide a great experience for them.
And also serve random realtors from Richmond, Virginia.
It's part of my community, right?
Right, that's it. I mean, I question who you choose to allow in your community, but other than that, I think you're on a solid track there. So, you and I talk about the nuances in our business nonstop because everybody knows. We had Grace Chavez, my coach, on there. And she was talking about what Brian Buffini is teaching us and what his systems are. and then kind of what the personality, the flavor we put on that system is kind of what this podcast is about. And just touching on that, um, what would you
Yeah.
say? What's working right now? What system? What is your spin on that? Um, would you say is working right now?
Well, I would say that the spin is to be fluid. Markets change and demographics of our clients change. And I mean, the same people I was serving 20 years ago or 18 years ago when I got in this business, we're in a different generation now. So, keeping up with current trends and things like that. But all that being said, the basics remain the basics.
Hmm.
Foundational success always remains foundational. So nuance, as you mentioned, is really the key here, and where I think someone who's you can take any system, whether it's Brian Buffini's system or the Ninja system or
Hmm.
whatever the system is, and you can apply it verbatim, and you can have tremendous success with that. Then there becomes this element where you can kind of put your own spin on things, where you can make the dialogues your own as opposed to just saying what the instructor says to say. And that's where I think the nuance and the growth comes from, and that's
Hmm.
where the personality starts to come in. I follow the Brian Buffini system very closely, but my dialogues are slightly different than his because I'm a different person than he is, right? And
Right.
my clients are different than the clients he was talking to 30 years ago when he implemented. And so, bringing this nuance to fruition. My market, Danny, and you know this, but my market is a strong population in our market is the U.S. military, all five
Hmm.
branches, plus NASA, plus DoD, and they have like realtors have a vocabulary.
Hmm.
Military personnel have a vocabulary, and if I'm talking to them as a realtor, they've got their military earpieces on, and I'm using a realtor mouthpiece or a microphone, and they're not connecting. So I've got to learn. I never served in the U.S. military, but I've got to learn some of the nuance of their vocabulary so I can communicate with them using their words, using things that they're familiar with.
And I think that's true across the board. I don't think that's just military versus non-military. I think a lot
No,
of
it
the
isn't. That's
nuance,
just my right. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
figuring
That
out
I would
how.
say that if you've got a clientele database that's primarily doctors, they're going to have someone in the medical field is going to have a different vocabulary. Someone in the
Mhm.
business world, if like Richmond, your market is a big financial district and insurance. It's a big financial hub. But I mean, it's New York, it's Hartford, Connecticut, and it's Richmond, Virginia. And so a lot of your clients have a different vocabulary.
Yeah, we're very, very corporate and we're very diverse up here. We have
Yeah,
MCV or VCU HS, the health system, which is one of our biggest employers. Dominion Energy is here. Capital One is here. Like you mentioned, I mean, we've got, tons of different industries and you find yourself kind of listening but to your point, I have to communicate with each one of them on their level. It's not,
that's right.
and some of the stuff that you and I have gone into talking about is like how do we talk one way to one spouse, for example, because they could be different people. Even in a relationship,
Hmm.
you could have an aesthetic and you could have a pragmatic, and to try to hit them both where they live in their language. Don't get me wrong, you're going to say things, authentically, but I mean, there's communication styles where we can really hit that communication style, and walk away with two clients instead of one client. Because if you do
That's
it,
right.
if you just connect with who you naturally connect with, then you have one client and you're going to call them because that's who you always communicate with. And hopefully they're the one driving the decision and you're going to sell that house. Now,
Yeah.
if you can communicate with them both the way they want to be communicated with, you leave with a true relationship with both of them and you've just kind of doubled your referral source. So I really
Yeah.
think what you're
Yeah.
saying is super important.
Yeah, yeah. Knowing the client and even knowing the client within the family, as you suggested, where two different stylistic approaches can be in the same family. That's great, and that's very true, and we see that all the time.
I mean, the other thing that I'm seeing that you and I have talked about recently is kind of the buyer intake. And that goes back to that communication you're talking about. What we're talking about
Yeah.
now is very different than what we would have been talking about 4 years ago. 4 years ago, we would have said, you want a house? What kind of house do you want? What kind of financing? Do we have a down payment? now we're getting into a lot more, and you kind of brought this to me. We're getting into a lot more of like, what other sources of money is there? Is there a gift letter? Is there, and I think you've got that all procedurized in ways that I am still just touching on. Did you want to
Yeah,
speak to that a little
we're
bit?
very processed, specifically on the buyer side. On my team, Danny, we do about 75% buyers and 25% listings. Now, our listings business is very robust, because when you're doing over 400, that's still over 100 listings a year. But
Hmm.
we do a lot of buyers. A lot of it's because of our market. A lot of it's because of people are moving here from somewhere else. And so we have become very processed on our buyer's side. And one of the things I was sharing with you offline is that we take a very systematic approach to that. So our thinking is, first of all, we need to make sure that we're putting ourselves in the leadership position, because
Hmm.
all too many times I see in this marketplace clients who are trying to do real estate and realtors that are just along for the ride. They're just kind of hanging on, hoping to get a commission, and they're happy to open a door, but they're not really processed in leading someone through the process of the purchasing pathway, right? So,
Yeah.
my analogy is, it's like walking through a minefield. Danny, if you step where I step, I've been through this thing 1,000 times. Step where I step, and everything's going to be fine. You go wandering off somewhere, and I'm not making you any promises. But if you'll just get behind me and step where I step, I can lead you through this process, as opposed to pushing you through the minefield, which might have catastrophic results.
Well, it's also, it's coming and you're informing them of that up front. You know what I mean? You're not being responsive. What I'm running into is a lot of agents. I'm kind of doing the 100 Days to Greatness training with some new agents that are coming on with us. And what I'm noticing from them is, my client calls me and they say there's a house in Midlothian, I want to go see it. And then they go show it to them. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they're not driving that process. They're not explaining, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen, and this is the way we
That's
do
right.
things here. I mean, Brian does a lot of great things with, lead gen and his philosophies and that sort of stuff. But I've leaned into some of the ninja stuff where it's like the funnel system. You know what I mean? And we're sitting them
Mm-hmm.
down and we're doing an actual intake. Don't get me wrong. Like, we are literally saying, hey, you've got to come sit down with us. You're officially hiring me. Here is your buyer's brokerage agreement.
Yeah.
Sign that, and that means we're working together. And this is
Yeah.
what the process looks like.
Right.
Um,
Right. So at our consultation, we're trying to convey three things: our competence and our confidence, and we're going to set proper expectations. Those are the
mhm.
three things we're trying to do. So when I make initial contact with a client, or anybody on my team makes initial contact, I don't care if it's a referral, I don't care if it's a sign call, I don't care if it's an internet lead, I don't care if it's whatever. Someone they just meet in the food line, grocery store line, and they say, "Oh, you're in real estate. I'd like to talk to you about buying a house." The first initial contact with that person, there's one goal, and it's to set a consultation. It's not to show them a house. It's not to talk about 3-2-1 buy downs on your interest rate. It's not to talk about market conditions. It's to set an appointment to have a consultation. And that is the way we process. So at that consultation, we then now bring in all these elements, and we set the proper expectations. And by doing so, we're demonstrating our competence, and doing it in a very practiced way, we're demonstrating our confidence as well.
Yeah, no, and I really like that, because then when you're working for someone. Like, I can't tell you how many, especially early in my career, you get agents clients where they come to you and they go, "Well, if you find this, I'm very
Yeah.
interested. If you find this," and you're like,
If
Okay,
you find
great."
this, right,
And
right,
then a month later, you see him working with another realtor, and you go, that jerk. And it's not that jerk.
yeah,
It's that you didn't say, "Hey, look, there's an official process and we've started."
yeah,
Because
yeah,
I didn't realize we were starting, and in his mind we were, and I didn't care, and I wasn't following up, and I wasn't giving him the
right.
attention that they want. Whereas if you
And maybe he
explain the
found
process,
an agent that would just open a door on his whim, and that
got lucky.
person may actually end up buying a house, but that's still not the process, right? They're not.
Correct.
I wouldn't call that representation.
Well,
Just opening doors is not representation.
I have a saying I really like, and it goes, the difference between a secret admirer and a stalker is how into it they are.
Yeah,
Which
great.
means you're gonna lay it out. You're gonna say, this is the process, and they're gonna agree to do that process, or they're not. But either way, you know where you're living. And
That's
don't get me
right.
wrong, if they say, "Hey, I'm not ready yet. I'll be ready in 6 months," check in 3 months. Don't, because they just don't know yet. Um, but they're going to appreciate the professionalism. They're going to appreciate, kind of where, the system. Because the biggest worry for
Yeah.
every buyer is, am I going to miss something and am I going to pay too much? Right. And if you're doing it from the beginning and when you're starting you're doing the official process and you're not doing it at 9 o'clock at night when they send you that house, you're doing the proper research on them in the front end. They know they're going to buy a house and not look at a house. I feel like that's an important distinction. So when I
Yeah.
find the house that they absolutely love, that checks all the boxes, and we've thought through it and we have clarity, they're going to pull that trigger on the first house or the fifth house. It's not going to matter. They're pulling it because it's the right house, not because it's, well, the mood hit and everything just lined
Right.
up.
Right. Yeah, the
What?
process is the key. That is the secret sauce. And it's, I see, and I know you see it too. Folks trying to shortcut it. If you don't shortcut the process and you take them through it, you end up being far more successful, and you do put yourself into a position where you can demonstrate your care for someone by representing them fully. And I think care is the secret element to obviously future referrals. So
I
when we, right. So when we, I typically will, when I'm meeting with a client, I'll obviously thank them for their time to meeting with me. And at the end, I always ask them the same question: has this been helpful? And I don't care if they're first time home buyer or 10th time home buyer. Every one of them says, this answered a lot of questions for me. Yes, this was very helpful. And so a lot of times they don't know what questions to ask. And again, if we're not processed in our approach and take them through that, they might go see houses with another agent, but never think to ask certain questions. And then that becomes a stumbling block down the road. So we make sure that they understand exactly what is expected, exactly what to expect as we go through this chronological called
Mhm.
finding you a house, and stop gaps along the way, and times when I'm going to turn to you and say, okay, is this the right one for you? If you answer yes, we're moving forward, and if you answer no, we're going to cut bait. But we're going to have a couple of times that we're going to have an opportunity to do that, so they understand what's coming. And listen, by telling them up front it's coming, when it happens, whether it's positive or negative, it's never my fault because I told them it
Right.
was coming, right? If I don't tell you that you need to write an earnest money check when you go to make an offer, and I'm showing you houses and you go, oh, I love this house, let's write an offer. And I say, great, did you bring your checkbook? And you go, checkbook for what? No, I got a pre-approval. I'm using a loan to buy the house. I'm not writing a check for it. No. I forgot to tell you, you got to write an earnest money check. It's a good faith deposit. First thing through their mind is, well, what else have you forgotten to tell me about?
Mhm.
Right. So now the trust is getting whittled away. Right. And the trusted advisor role is changing a little bit. Now I'm the guy that's forgetting things up front. So I've got to set the proper expectations at everybody up front. And by doing so, if I say, you like this house, let's write an offer. Did you bring your checkbook? You're like, I forgot it. It's at home right now. It's not, you're not going, whoa, it's a whole different attitude towards me because I told you it was coming, right?
Right.
I told you this was part of the process. So again, that's a silly example, but it is an example. The reason I tell people there's an earnest money check is because that happened to me one time. And I was like, okay, that's not ever going to happen again.
Well, and that's a lot of how you learn, is get your teeth kicked in and you remember those emotions and you don't want to go there. But with the process and kind of joining the team, you know, you're giving them that process up front. We're
Yes.
showing them, what to expect. Here's the official thing. And while I'm sitting at my desk with my notes in front of me, I remember everything I'm supposed to remember, versus when we're sitting in front of, we're in a car on our way to a house and I'm navigating, I'm driving, I'm worried about how we're going to get in. And then we got to figure out all that stuff. I feel like all of that formal stuff is really good. The other thing that I really like to do on my intakes, I like to ask them what they're concerned about, because
Yeah.
we'll launch into it. You know what I mean? And we'll give them all
Yeah.
this great info, but there's one or two burning things that they're really, really worried about. And if you can hit that, well, you have their 15 minutes of undivided attention, because people don't pay attention that long,
That's
at
right.
least on that level, then you've addressed that and you know where they're sensitive.
Yeah.
I think that's another important part that I'd put in the intake. Um, but the process is everything. Like that, like you said, that is the secret sauce. Do you find that you have an ideal client that you're wanting to work with? I know you mentioned the military, and that's a lot of your base because that's who's there, and they're great because
Yeah.
they move every 3 years. So
Yeah.
30% of
I
the
mean, the
military
ideal
moves
client.
every year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ideal client and I can be facetious and say, yeah, someone that's got all the money in the world and they're paying cash, but not, that's really not the ideal client. The ideal client is the one who is willing to be coached, but is also willing to put themselves in position to buy a house in the current market, whatever the current market is.
Hmm.
Okay, the current market right now is not what the current market was 5 years ago, is not what the current market was 10 years ago, and is not what the current market was 15 years ago, right? So the current market right now, there are certain things that a buyer, by taking coaching, needs to do to position themselves to be in the best possible place to make offers and get offers or an offer received. And some people aren't willing to do it. Now, everybody wants to buy a house. I
Hmm.
mean, you poll 100 people and you say, is it a good idea to buy a house? All 100 are going to say yes. But there's only a portion that are going to be willing to put themselves in position and do the things up front to make sure that they're capable when it comes to the current market. Now that used to be just getting pre-approved, but now it's not. Now it's reserves. Now it's you've got to understand what negotiation looks like in 2023. You've got to look. You've got to know what an acceptable offer is in 2023, and you got to be willing to hear what I've got to coach you on that. But then you've got to also be willing to put yourself in that position to say, okay, if that's what it's going to take to get from point A to point B, I'm willing to put myself in position to do that. So the ideal client is that it's someone willing to take the coaching and put themselves in position to make solid offers.
Which totally makes sense because what they have to do right now, you can't. I was teasing somebody the other day. You can't passively buy a house. The process is too involved for you to be like, "Oops, I accidentally, tripped, and then the pen made a mark on the contract, and
Yeah.
now we own a
The
house."
keys ended up in
Great,
my pocket. Yeah.
right? That's not going to happen today. I mean, you're going to need even the emotional bandwidth to handle. I mean, because having them choose another offer is a rejection. Any way you want to look at it, you know
Right.
what I mean? Like
Right.
you need to be willing to do that. And to your point, you've told them the process, you've told them how tough it's going to be, but you've also told them it's possible, and then these are the tools to get there. And I think that's really important because people are buying a house every day, and it is a good idea to buy a house. And
Yep.
also being able to accept what you can afford is another big piece. Like you get a 22-year-old who comes to you and says, "Look, I want a mansion." In the
Yeah.
hottest neighborhood. And you're like, well,
Yeah.
me too. The
Yeah.
dream
Yeah.
house is like,
I'll
it's
take
just that.
10, please.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I told somebody the other day, I said, "Look, I'm 44 and I'm not there yet. Uh, you
Mm.
know,
Yep.
we're
I
all
hear
working
you.
towards it though. You know what I mean?
That's
Keep
right.
going.
That's
But
right.
you got to get on the ride to move up. You know what I mean? You got to get on the ladder to go up the ladder. And so, buying that first house is super important. Um, what other processes have you feel like you've installed in Brian's system? So, there's the calls, the notes, the pop buys, but who are you calling? Do you have a reason
Yeah.
to call?
Yeah, we do we kind of do all the things. I mean, we do client events and we do I've always kind of felt that my strength was in a one-on-one position, like just having coffee with somebody. And what I did early in my career, because coming out of the corporate world, Danny, the last 4 years, but really about the last 8 years in my corporate career, I was working a lot with companies, different companies that I would supply, and I had to learn how to work with those managers who weren't in my hierarchy, but how to get my goals accomplished through managers of companies that aren't in my company, right? So like business to business, like so we did a
Mhm.
lot of companies outside of ours. We had to try to have some influence there, and it's a different way of managing than when you're managing in a corporate pyramid where my business card's bigger than your business card, so I'm the boss, right? Well, when you're with different companies, it doesn't work that way. So coming into real estate, I really understood that, and going way back in 2005 when I was first exposed to Brian Buffini's system, I was watching the original 100 Days to Greatness product, and he talked about the pillars of income, and he mentioned business to business. And he kind of mentions it, he talks about it, and then he moves on to some other things. That really resonated with me. And I started taking that early in 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and all the way through my career, and have built a really strong business to business referral network, a reciprocating relationship network that is really the catalyst for how I was able to start the team in 2009. I honestly was generating more business than I could personally handle. And so I was like, well, I got options. I can start a brokerage. I can, which I didn't want to do. I could, sell them for 25%, but then I lose influence as to how the leads are handled and my name's still attached to them. Or I could hire a bunch of assistants and become a super agent, or I could start a team. And obviously, with my background, the team spoke to me,
Hmm.
and I was like, this is something that will work. I know I can run the team. It's just I've learned so many things about building them over the years. I can implement that, and I was on a very good team when I started my career in real estate, a very well run team. It just went through the 08, 09 issues and of the market, and it kind of it during that time that team kind of lost its value proposition, and
Hmm.
so now the compensation model didn't match up, so it was like, all right, time to go. So that's what kind of forced me out of that company and started my own team. But the bandwidth that I had from a business to business network of reciprocating businesses, that's what was the catalyst and really the cornerstone for me to launch my team. So working in business to business is no different than working business to person with a client database or
Hmm.
something like that. So it's no different. It's doing the same things, but you're just doing it with people of influence, people who are in themselves running a business, people who in themselves would benefit from your referrals. So I had to learn how to refer them very well, and they
Hmm.
would then reciprocate and refer me very well.
Which that's always really important. I have a business to business network as well, and and you kind of reminded me of that when I was low not too long ago, and tap back into that. But they're great because they get it. They know what you're doing. They know why you're doing it, and they're not mad at you for it because they're doing it. You know what I mean?
That's
I'm
exactly
like,
right.
and that's kind of one of your better referral sources, just because they do get it, and you can kind of.
And by them getting it and by you initiating it, you're basically they're in their minds they're thanking thanks for you doing this because I haven't yet done this. I know I should be doing this, but I'm not doing this. You're
Mhm.
doing it. Kudos to you, and they respect that. And they're like, I should be doing exactly what you're doing because you're right. They do get it.
Yeah, and that's always great. What do you think that your biggest takeaway from an event is? Getting back to we're kind of at the. What do you think that you've gone to an event and you just got this one thing that you came back and said, "Man, this makes sense to
Yeah,
me."
honestly, the event was 2013, and the event is what you and I are flying out for this coming weekend, and that is Buffini's Peak Experience. In 2013 was my first event. My coach at the time really made me work hard to get there. I wanted to go to that event for like 3 to 4 years prior, and he wouldn't let me go because back then you had to get like a coach recommendation and certain numbers and things like that. Well, I had the numbers, but he knew how bad I wanted to go, and because of that, I think he held me back on it because he knew I would do anything it would take to get there, and it was wise on his part. It was frustrating on my part, but it was wise on his part. But when I went to my first event for Peak in 2013, it was a game changer for me. One, because I'd worked so hard to get there, but two, because I was ready for the material when it was presented. And the concept was quantum leap. And I was at a place in my business where I had 4 to 6 agents. We were doing, I don't know, 130, 150 transactions a year. We had no staff, so it was very lean. It was very profitable. It was very, the agents were making really great splits because we had no overhead, right? So it was basically, we that was my original concept of the team. When I came back, my realization that my value proposition needed to be far more robust than what it was. And I came back from that event and started implementing some things along with my coach helping me along the way,
Hmm.
and really helping build out and adding to my value proposition, which now has grown into a much larger team with staff and much more support and a far greater and more robust value proposition than I ever had in the past.
Which that translates to a better product for your clients as well. It's
Absolutely right.
you know what I mean, and that's the driving factor. Like, how
Absolutely
do
right.
we best serve our client? And that's kind of how I built mine too. Is we have the support staff first, and then we expand the sales force after the fact.
Yeah.
Um, what
And it
would you
was
say?
the takeaway, Danny, was that I could scale my business. Now that's a term that we hear a lot now. You heard it, and I heard it in September when we went to
Hmm.
the Buffini's first teams conference.
Hmm.
That scalability was kind of is a mindset and a concept that was really in the forefront of that training session. That's what I heard in 2013. That, oh my gosh, I could scale this thing. I could actually put, right now we're busting, every day we're busting just to get through the day and do the transactions we're doing, but we can actually leverage this thing and scale it. And that was the takeaway.
Which and that's a mindset shift, because that's
Yes.
abundance versus scarcity.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
that's hey, I'm going to generate these leads, and it's okay that I hand them to her because I'm going to make more of them, and I believe in myself, and I know I can pull that off. And we're going in this direction. It's also an intentionality to form a business. It's more of that than it is, because I've definitely been a part of brokerages and worked at real estate firms where you know, your numbers were everything, your personal numbers. And the more that I talk to big agents, the more I realize I'm like, well, yeah, you got 3 showing assistants. So
Yeah.
it's not really,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, yes, the numbers, your name is next to that number, but a lot of people own that number.
That's right.
Um, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I that was a realization to me. It's also bigger agents aren't doing more activities, they're doing them better. They're sharper. Their skills, they're when they say that something, people are hearing it. They're not having to say it 13 times,
Yeah.
which I thought that was
They're
really cool.
practiced. Right.
Right. What's your favorite quote? This
Oh,
is
I
a
got
one that always
gobs
hits
of
me.
them. But the best advice I ever got was from my dad, and he taught me to leave it better than you found it, no matter what it is. It could be a relationship. It could be the sink at the locker room in the gym I work out at. Okay, it just I'm going to leave it better than I found it. So and our business is that way, and it's founded on that. So I don't know if that's my favorite quote, but that I'm going to call that my favorite quote.
I'll take it. I like it. That's one I will add to my personal philosophy. I keep a whole bunch of quotes. And you know what? I'm going to call it, I'm going to give your dad credit. I'm going to call it Mr. Chaplin. You know what I
Yep,
mean?
that's Dick Chaplin's best quote. As
Uh,
leave it better than you found it.
if you had
He
a
also was
super,
the guy that taught me that I'm like 5'8", 100 and at that time 150 pounds soaking wet, and he said, look, and I grew up on a sawmill, so I mean I was stacking lumber, full time job when I was 11 years old. So he taught me really quickly that I needed to learn how to make money from my neck up as opposed to from my neck down, because this body wasn't built for manual labor. Or let's just say that the amount of income was going to be finite based on what this body could do. So he goes, you need to make money with your neck up, not your neck down.
that's funny. It's so great how your parents can be so honest with you. You know what I mean?
Right? Yeah.
And this whole like trying not to hurt people's feelings didn't exist back then. I have a feeling because my
No,
dad
that
didn't
was a
care.
different era, my friend. That was a different era.
I was gonna say my dad didn't care either. The what would you say your superpower is? If you had a superpower, what would you think it would be?
It's my profile. It's I'm that's what's cool about our profiles is each one of us has an individual one, right? I think Brian and Kevin Buffini say all the time how they've done like thousands and thousands and thousands of these things, and no two have ever come out the same. And I think that's all of our secret powers. I think that's our superpowers is understanding our wiring, understanding what our profile is. I'll use the word profile for all the psychological stuff, understanding what makes us tick, understanding what our hot buttons are, and then being willing to submit yourself to content and learning to learn how to best use that.
Hmm.
That is all of our superpowers.
Yeah, I always say you got to play the hand you're dealt. It's not.
That is definitely the hand you're dealt. Yes,
You know what I mean? It's like my joke is I got a pair of twos, but I just play them real well. Like
just play him really well. Yep.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can still win with them. It's a little harder, but you can do
And,
it.
right. And look, that can work against you too. It's not always a positive thing. And I think Brian did a really good job of putting that in front of us last year at Peak when he related it to Cool Hand Luke and how Luke was a slave to his profile. So he had certain, because every attribute has positives and negatives.
Mm-hmm.
And if all you do is focus on the negative aspects of your profile, you can be a really messed up dude, or dudess, right? So you obviously we've got to remember, it's not just, okay, my superpower is my wiring. It's also then submitting myself to the learning and discussion and opportunities to best utilize that profile, not worst utilize that profile, because there's a worst side to it as well. And that's where it can be very tricky, and why we have a lot of times things happen. You go, well, that's just in my profile. That's the way it's going to be. Well, that's being a slave to your profile. That's not true. If we looked at that same element and we said, okay, there's some positive attributes to that as well. Let's learn how to dive into that instead of relying or falling back on the others. That is the superpower, is moving that thing in a positive direction
and choosing what elements you're going to highlight. You know what I mean? Like yes, you got the pair of twos, but you're also going a little bit further and saying, all right, well, I need the third two. You know what I mean? I'm going to find it. I'm going to sharpen it. I'm going to develop it. I'm going to make that choice, which, and all the time I've known you, I know for a fact you do that very, very well.
Well, thank you. It's a mission, right? It's a mission.
Well, I know how busy you are, so and we could talk all day, and we will be talking for the next couple of days in Arizona. But thank you so much for taking all this time to talk with me, Greg. I really appreciate you.
Danny. I really like what you're doing here, and I really admire the effort you're putting into it. So keep up the good work, and I'm always here for you if there's ever anything I can do to help add value, or just be a sounding board, or just someone to if you need to punch the punching bag, I'll hold it for you.
Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to apply this information to your business immediately. This message will not self-destruct in 5 seconds. Good luck, agents.